In this video, what I'm going to go over is how to make a few adjustments to set up VPT where it will work on the latest Mac OS systems. So what we're going to do is the first thing is you go to the website where you can download a copy of VPT. And from the top of the page, if you scroll down, and depending on your system, you'll either want OS X for Mac or the Windows. You want VPT7, also the extras, video trigger, sound trigger, and video trimmer. And again, look at the end where it'll say either Mac or Windows and choose accordingly based on your computer. So those are going to download into your downloads folder. And up at the top right, you see the progress bar. And now what we're going to do is navigate over to the downloads folder and we're going to look for those files. From here, I'm going to select what I need. And I'm looking for the VPT, sound trigger, video trigger, and video trimmer. And notice I've also downloaded something else called Siphon Recorder. We will need that later. There's some additional links on the syllabus about where you can find Siphon Recorder. If you haven't already, go ahead and download that, and we'll also, when we set up VPT, we'll drop that file into the other folder as well. So here we have VPT, our main folder. We'll open that up. The other files on the desktop we have here, sound trigger, video trimmer, and Siphon Recorder. We're just going to select all of those and drop those into the main folder. And those are fine there. And now what we need to do is make a few tweaks and move the GUI, which is hidden under the default project folder. We need to move that out and put it into the main location where we have everything else saved. So it's just a little bit of a tweak that it's hidden. The GUI is hidden under default projects and under presets. We need to select the GUI. It's GUI.json and move that to the main VPT7 folder. Anytime you launch VPT, you want to double click on the GUI. So that will always be what you click on. So intuitively you would think that it would be the black VPT7 icon, but we had to make a few tweaks. So now what we're going to do is anytime you open VPT, you want to select the GUI. VPT is going to open. You'll see 3 windows. And now we want to do a couple things. Just because you get the interface to pop up, that doesn't mean it's actually working. We have to check these things. And so now I'm ready to test. So the first thing I want to do is create a new layer. So go to the plus sign, click that, and it will add 1 new layer. Okay, great. Now I need to actually turn on some of my source media. So on number 1 source, I'm going to go down to the drop down and select patank.move, which is a movie file. I'm going to turn that on. And then I also want to turn on the monitor, which is the button right above. And when I have the monitor turned on, I can see a little preview of what that movie clip is going to be. And if I go down to the layer, I can then route one of the sources to that layer. So I'm going to select video 1. So that means patank.move that I turned on. Now I should see that on layer 1 if I've done everything correctly and it's working. The next thing that I want to test is project path. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go down to the mask and editor to make a custom mask. You'll get this pop up, and then you can, by clicking anywhere on this shape, that you can make new points and drag them around to make whatever kind of a custom shape that you would want. And so I'm just going to do a really quick simple house. And then up at the top where it says no circle, I'm going to change that name and I'm going to change that to the word house. And once I have that set, sorry, I'm typing really slow. When I have that set, then I'm going to select Save Mask. And what that's going to do is that mask, it's made a file where it's masking out the full rectangle of the video to make that little house shape. And you also see in the drop-down it says house.png. And so that's great. That means I'm able to make these custom masks which depend on project paths. So I know that that's working, so that's great. We'll talk more about storing states with the VPT, which is the equivalent of saving. I don't really want to save what I did, so I just closed VPT. And just also note that that's not going to be there the next time I open VPT. I didn't save it. And just to show you an example, if you double click on the VPT7 icon, again, the same 3 windows are going to pop up, but it actually isn't working, that you can't actually use VPT this way, because if you see I'm adding a layer but it's not actually letting me open any video media. And so just to show you an example of just because you get the windows doesn't mean it's actually working. So you want to check and make sure that you can create a new layer and you can find your video media and link that up to one of the layers. So I'm just going to quit that. And you'll also see this window that you don't see when you go through the GUI. And so now we know every time we launch the GUI that VPT is going to work, so that's great. And just to also show you that the custom mask that I made, you can see that here. There's the little house that I made, that's inside of the default project and mask folder. And so when I say project paths are working, that means that we were able to create that file and save it to that folder. The other thing that I wanted to show you here is actually you can see the default video project that you can see the built-in video files that are right there. And also let's go ahead and just mark the GUI that I went up to the little gear and marked it in red, so you have that little dot so you always know to just help remind yourself to launch VPT from the GUI. And so just have that as a visual reminder. So to show you the changes in security that I'm inside the system preferences and security and privacy, that I actually had to go in and disable my gatekeeper. And now I see this where I can allow apps downloaded from anywhere to open. So that was actually something I had to do through the terminal. So I've got a handout that I've made for my class that you can see how to do that on the handout if that's something that you want to do. And there's also more information about how to disable the gatekeeper. Okay, so that's the basics to get VPT up and running. PC people experiment with the GUI. I've had some people report back to me that you actually do not have to move the GUI file. However, Mac people, particularly on the latest OS, you will have to do these workarounds to get VPT to work. So the last thing I wanted to make a note about before we wrap up is just to remind everyone to resist the urge to rename the default project folder. That VPT works on project paths, and so it's set up right now that you see the little project path.txt, that's a text file, and the project path is looking for a folder called default project. And so if you just simply rename the folder default project and you don't go in and update the project path with a new name, that it's going to disable VPT. And so it's either you're making changes to both places or you just leave the default project folder alone. Unless you feel confident about making those two changes, just leave everything alone, don't rename it. And the other thing to remember is just resist the urge to pull things out. People that are new with VPT, that they see that little VPT7 icon with the little black square, and it looks like something that you would download and then pull that out and drop it into your applications folder. Well, that's not the way that VPT works. That everything needs to stay together in this little folder as a standalone package. So it functions a bit differently. And also a reminder that you can have multiple copies of VPT. And let's say you have one copy of VPT that you've dedicated to one project, and you can have that stored on your machine, and another project that you're working on that you can have a completely separate copy of VPT. That I actually have a copy of VPT that I use just for my teaching, one that I used for a live projection mapping project, and one that I've used for some gallery installation. So it's completely separate copies of VPT that I have, which is a unique thing about VPT. It's different than other types of software that you're probably used to working with. And another thing that I like about VPT is that it is very portable, so you can actually have it live on a thumb drive and take it from computer to computer. So just some things to keep in mind, and just some heads up to potentially troubleshoot some other issues that if you run into the issue of the default project folder renaming, which happens a lot with new students that run into this issue. So just either update the project path text file with the new name or just leave it alone. So all right, and thanks for watching, and everybody that's watching this from my class, you know how to get a hold of me if you run into issues. And for those of you that are a part of the VPT7 community and just happen to be following along with us, I hope that helps everybody out there. All right, thanks so much.